Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Highland Mystery. Oliver here. There are villages that will argue for 20 minutes over the proper thickness of marmalade and then stand shoulder to shoulder when a roof comes off in a gale. Lochdubh was one of those places. It could survive storms, bad roads, poor plumbing, and the sort of council letters that arrived in brown envelopes and smelled faintly of trouble, but it trembled when someone threatened its wee school. For a school is never only a school. It is the morning gate, the lost mittens, the staff-room kettle, the nativity tea towels, and every parent pretending not to care what the other parents think. And when blame settles on the easiest family to sneer at, Hamish Macbeth follows a tiny green notch to the truth. If you enjoy these Highland mysteries, do give the story a like and settle in by the fire. Chapter 1. The Morning Gate. The first real quarrel of the morning began with a glove. Not a dramatic glove, not a blood-stained glove, not the sort of glove that would have interested a detective in a book with a London publisher and a map on the end papers. It was a small purple knitted glove, damp at the cuff, dropped just inside the railings of Lochdubh Primary School. Its owner, Isla McRae, aged 5, had entered the playground with one hand bare and one hand triumphantly waving a lunchbox shaped like a sheep. Her mother had already kissed the air beside another mother's cheek and was pretending she had not noticed Mrs. Donalda Campbell watching the uncovered hand with the severe expression of a woman who had once raised 4 children through winters so hard that frost formed on the inside of the bedroom window. "She'll catch her death," said Donalda. "She will not," said Isla's mother, Myri, too quickly. "It's only from the car to the door." "It starts that way," said Donalda, as if pneumonia had a habit of lurking just beyond the school gate with a notebook. The wind came off the sea in hard little slaps. It worried at scarves, flattened hair, rattled the paper notices taped inside the school porch, and made the banner in the hall window flap faintly against the glass. The banner had been painted by the older children in cheerful, uneven letters. "We are a happy school." The word happy had begun to peel at the corner. Hamish Macbeth stood by the railings with his hands in the pockets of his old police jacket and his cap pulled low. He had not come officially, or not very officially. Morag Dunnett, the head teacher, had telephoned the station the previous afternoon in a voice that tried to be brisk and failed. "It is nothing criminal, Hamish. Not yet. Only there may be tempers." "Tempers at a school gate? You would be surprised." Hamish had not been surprised. In Lochdubh, people could quarrel over a missing library book with a bitterness usually reserved for disputed inheritances. Lugs, his dog, lay beside the railings like a retired sentry who had no intention of returning to service. He had positioned himself exactly where the pushchairs needed to pass, and the young mothers were obliged to steer around him in a careful line. Lugs watched this with the calm of a creature who believed the entire world could benefit from slowing down. "You'll need to move him, Hamish," said Mrs. Wellington, the minister's wife, arriving with a cardboard box of donated reading books. "He's providing traffic management. He's providing obstruction." "Aye, well, there's many a man made a career of that." Mrs. Wellington gave him a look, but her mouth twitched. "There's a gentleman from the council coming today." "So I've heard." "He is not merely from the council. He is from Education Standards." Hamish turned his gaze toward the road. "That sounds worse." "It is worse. Standards people have files." Down by the bend, a dark council car appeared, glossy and clean in a way that made it look foreign to Lochdubh. It eased past Patel's general store, past the War Memorial, past the line of cottages hunched against the weather, and stopped outside the school gate. The man who got out had a good coat, good shoes, and a face arranged for politeness rather than warmth. He was in his 40s, thin without looking fit, with pale eyes and a briefcase held as if it contained not papers but verdicts. He paused before shutting the car door and glanced at the school building. It was an old stone place, low and stubborn, with white window frames in need of paint and a roof that had resisted weather, budget meetings, and educational fashion for generations. The playground had puddles at one end. The bicycle rack held 2 bicycles and 1 scooter with a missing handle grip. A faded mural of a seal smiled from the side wall, with the determined cheer of public art. "Mr. Preece?" said Morag Dunnett, coming down the path to meet him. Morag was a compact woman in a navy cardigan, with iron-grey hair cut short and the kind of face that looked plain until she smiled. She was not smiling now. Behind her, two small boys were arguing over whether a worm in the playground was alive, dead, or just thinking. "Gavin Preece," said the man. "Standards and Provision Review." He offered his hand. Morag shook it. He looked past her at the line of parents. "Healthy turnout," he said. "It's drop-off." "Yes," he said. "Roll visibility is always interesting at drop-off." A silence moved through the gate. Not a dramatic silence. A village silence. The kind where everybody kept talking, but softer, and with one ear turned. Eyelid Sutherland detached herself from a group of mothers by the porch. She was tall, fair, carefully dressed against the wind, and carried a tote bag that announced, "Proud parent, proud school." Everything about her looked efficient. Even her hair seemed to have been persuaded into obedience by moral force. "Mr. Preece," she said, bright as a polished bell. "I'm Eyelid Sutherland, Parent Council Chair. We're very glad you're here." Hamish noticed Morag's shoulders tighten. "That is generous," said Gavin Preece. "We believe in accountability," said Eyelid, "and excellence, and community partnership." Hamish had seen fishermen bring in nets less heavily loaded than that sentence. Preece smiled. "Good. Then I hope you will understand the need for clarity. Roll numbers, catchment compliance, transport arrangements, attendance stability. All routine?" "Of course," said Eyelid. A woman at the gate muttered, "Routine, my foot." The woman was Leanne Fraser, though Hamish knew most folk still referred to her as "that Fraser girl," despite the fact that she was 29 and had a child of her own. She was small, dark-haired, and tired in the way of people who did not get to be tired out loud. Her son, Robbie, stood beside her, with his school bag hanging open and one sock sliding toward his shoe. "You're late again," said Donalda Campbell, not quite under her breath. Leanne bent to fix Robbie's sock. "We're here before the bell." "Barely." Hamish shifted. "Morning, Leanne." She looked up, guarded at first, then relieved. "Morning, Hamish." Robbie looked at Lugs. "Is he asleep?" "Officially," said Hamish. "Unofficially, he's listening." Robbie considered this. "My grandad snores when he listens." "Aye, so does Lugs. It's advanced listening." The boy grinned and ran through the gate. A bell rang inside the school, thin and metallic, and the children began to funnel toward the door. The parents lingered, as parents do, even after the children had forgotten them. Gavin Preece stood with his briefcase and watched the movement. "Do all children arrive through this gate?" he asked Morag. "Must." "Must?" "Ah, we have a small side entrance for nursery drop-off and deliveries." "Noted." He said it pleasantly. Hamish wondered how many decent places had been damaged by men who said "noted" pleasantly. Inside the school, the smell was of wet coats, poster paint, old wood, and something sweet from the kitchen. Morag led Preece toward the office. Hamish followed because Morag gave him a look that said she had not asked for him merely to admire the weather. The school office was barely large enough for 2 adults and a filing cabinet, but it had managed to contain 3 decades of emergencies: sick children, angry parents, lost permission slips, the photocopier's long illnesses, and once a sheepdog that had wandered in during assembly and refused to leave until given a biscuit. On Morag's desk lay the attendance register, a thick book with softened corners. Beside it sat a green rubber stamp and a small square ink pad. Morag opened the register with practised hands. "We mark late arrivals after the bell," she said, as if beginning a lesson for a child she did not trust. "Absences after we have phoned home." Gavin Preece leaned in. Hamish watched Morag press the green stamp onto the ink pad and then into the register beside one name. Late. The mark was clear enough, except for a tiny bite missing from the lower left corner of the rectangle. Hamish pointed. "That stamp's seen some service." Morag looked at it. and for a second something like fondness softened her face. "That stamp's been chipped for years. Mrs. Drummond dropped it during a Christmas concert panic in 2009. We were missing 2 shepherds and a donkey head." Priest took a small notebook from his briefcase. "You continue to use defective administrative equipment?" Morag stared at him. Hamish said, "It's a stamp, man, not a ferry." Morag coughed. "It might have been a laugh, if she had been in better spirits." Priest did not laugh. He looked at the register, the stamp, the office, the curling certificate on the wall, and then back at Morag. "I will need access to attendance records for the previous 3 terms. Transport lists, address details, catchment exceptions, any late changes, any discretionary arrangements." "Discretionary?" said Morag. "You know what I mean." Hamish saw it then, the faintest flicker in Morag's eyes. Not guilt, exactly. Fear. Outside the office, the school settled into its morning rhythm. A teacher called for silence. A child laughed. Somewhere, a chair scraped. The bell had stopped ringing, but the sound of it seemed to hang in the building a little longer than usual. At the gate, the adults had begun to drift away, carrying their empty hands back into the wind. The purple glove still lay by the railings. Luggs opened one eye, considered it, and closed the eye again. Hamish picked it up. There were days, he thought, when a village could be undone by a very small thing. Chapter 2. Traybakes and Virtue. The Parent Council meeting was held that evening in the school hall, under the happy banner, and beside a radiator that made a gallant show of heat without contributing any. The hall had been designed in an era when children were expected to be hardy and adults were expected not to complain unless a wall actually fell on them. Its floorboards creaked. Its curtains smelled faintly of dust and Christmas plays. At one end stood a tea-urn, a fold-out table, and a regiment of Traybakes cut into squares of such varying size that Mrs. Wellington silently rearranged them by fairness. Eyelid Sutherland stood behind the table with a clipboard. "Now," she said, though nobody had yet stopped talking. "Now, if we could begin." People continued removing coats, finding chairs, balancing mugs, and whispering in little knots. "Now," said Eyelid again, louder. Alec McIver, the caretaker, came in carrying a stack of extra chairs. He was a broad, stooped man in his late 50s, with hands permanently darkened by oil, polish, paint, or weather. People called him Spanner, because years earlier he had fixed the church heating with one, then carried the nickname ever since as punishment for being useful. "Where do you want these?" he asked. "Along the back," said Eyelid. "Neatly, please." Alec looked at the back of the hall, where 5 chairs already stood in a line. "I was going to make a wee sculpture." A few people smiled. Eyelid did not. Hamish sat near the side door, partly because he liked an exit, and partly because the socket behind the curtain was working. Beneath his chair, hidden by his coat, his small electric heater was charging like contraband. His cottage had been damp for a fortnight, and the fuse box had developed strong opinions about kettles, lamps, and human comfort. He was ashamed of the heater, though he could not have said why. Perhaps because a policeman should not need to steal warmth from a primary school wall socket. Perhaps because shame attaches itself to small domestic failures more easily than large public ones. Kieran Ward sat 2 rows ahead, notebook ready. Kieran was the trainee police constable currently attached to Hamish, with the earnestness of a puppy and the discretion of a brass band. He had polished his shoes for the meeting and wore an expression suggesting he expected civic disorder to break out among the flapjacks. "Good attendance," he whispered to Hamish. "Aye. Should I note names? Only if you're planning to send thank-you cards." Kieran frowned, unsure whether this was instruction. At the front, Gavin Priest sat with his briefcase open on his knees. He had accepted tea and refused a caramel shortbread. This had already turned several people against him. Eyelid tapped her clipboard. "As you all know, we are here to discuss the upcoming spring fundraiser, the outdoor learning grant, and the council review. I want to begin by saying that everything we do for the children." A murmur of approval went round the hall, though some said it with more exhaustion than conviction. "For the children," echoed Donalda Campbell. "For the children," said Mrs. Wellington, but gently, as if the phrase needed rescuing from overuse. Morag sat at the end of the front row. She had changed from her school cardigan into another cardigan, so similar that only she could have known it was different. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap. Eyelid continued. "Lochdubh Primary is not merely a building. It is the heart of our village. It is tradition. It is community. It is excellence." Alec McIver, at the back, murmured, "And damp." His neighbour gave a small snort. Eyelid heard. "Alec, if there are building issues, we can address them through the proper channels." "Aye," said Alec. "That'll warm the place." Gavin Priest looked up. "Building condition is one element, but my remit concerns educational viability. Roll numbers matter. Attendance matters. Catchment compliance matters." The word compliance did to the room what a cold draught did to a candle. Myrie McCrae raised her hand. "Are you saying the school might close?" "I am saying," said Priest, "that the council must consider whether small rural provision remains sustainable." "You mean bus our children an hour down the road?" said Leanne Fraser from the back. Several heads turned. Not kindly. Priest gave her the same polite look he might have given a form filled in incorrectly. "Transport arrangements are considered." "Robbie gets travel sick," Leanne said. Eyelid stepped in. "Nobody wants children distressed, but we must show ourselves at our best. That means punctuality, participation, proper standards." Her eyes moved, briefly, toward Leanne. Leanne looked down into her tea. Hamish saw Morag flinch. It was tiny, quick, almost nothing. But he had spent years watching people lie with their mouths, while their shoulders told the truth. "We've had a little issue," Eyelid continued, "with late arrivals. I know life is busy. I know mornings are difficult. But lateness sends a message. It says school is optional. It says education comes after convenience." "Some buses are not convenient," said Leanne, without looking up. "A child's future should be worth effort," said Eyelid. There it was, the neat blade of virtue. Mrs. Wellington opened her mouth and then closed it again. She had a minister's wife's instinct for diffusing judgment, but even she looked uncertain how to do it without making matters worse. Kieran leaned toward Hamish. "Should I intervene?" "No, but there's visible tension. It's a parent council meeting. Visible tension is the agenda." Gavin Priest took out a paper from his file. "I will require registers, transport lists, and proof of catchment compliance by tomorrow afternoon." Morag said, "Tomorrow?" "Yes. That is not much time. I understood the school was well administered." Eyelid smiled too brightly. "We can help, Mr. Priest. The parents are very committed." "I need official records, not enthusiasm." A few people looked offended on behalf of enthusiasm. The meeting moved on to fundraising. There was to be a Saturday event in the hall. Soup, second-hand books, children's artwork, a raffle, and a stall where parents could pay to guess the weight of a fruitcake baked by Mrs. Wellington. The fruitcake itself sat wrapped in greaseproof paper beneath the table like a holy relic. "Every pound counts," said Eyelid, "and every parent must do their share." Leanne said nothing. Alec began putting away the extra chairs while the meeting was still in progress. Not noisily, just with the quiet confidence of a man who had decided the meeting had already said all it was going to say. Afterward, people drifted toward the Traybakes. Hamish unplugged his heater and tucked it under his coat. "Is that school property?" asked Kieran. "No." "Is it evidence?" "Only of damp." Kieran wrote something in his notebook. Hamish sighed. At the tea table, Gavin Priest spoke quietly to Morag. "I will be frank. The numbers are marginal. If the attendance pattern is unstable as well, it will be difficult to justify independent provision." Morag's face looked suddenly older. "Children are not numbers," she said. "No," said Priest. "But numbers decide where children go." Eyelid, passing with a plate of millionaire shortbread, paused just long enough to hear. Then she moved on. Hamish watched her cross the hall. She stopped by a notice board where PTA announcements had been stamped in green at the top, as if the word "approved" had any legal significance in a building where half the notices were held up by hope and old blue tack. She straightened one paper, smoothed a corner, checked the room to see who had noticed. Outside, the wind pressed against the hall windows. Inside, the tea urn hissed, the banner trembled, and every adult in the room kept saying for the children as if repetition could make it true. Chapter 3. A Kettle That Shouldn't Kill. By Friday evening, the rain had settled into the kind of steady misery that made the Highlands look less romantic and more like a test of character administered by water. Hamish's cottage did not pass the test. The kitchen wall was damp again. Not dramatically damp, not streaming, but touched with a dark bloom that suggested the cottage had private sorrow in its stones. The fuse tripped when he boiled the kettle, then again when he tried the lamp, then once more when he stood in the kitchen and said something mild but heartfelt about electricians. Sunsy, his wildcat, watched from the table with fierce yellow eyes and the expression of a magistrate hearing a poor defence. "Do not look at me like that," Hamish told him. Sunsy blinked once. Lugs lay by the stove, which was not lit, and sighed with such force that the rug moved. "Aye, I know," said Hamish. "You'd have done better joining a family with central heating." The school hall had sockets that worked. This was the thought that returned to him as he sat in the cold kitchen wearing his coat indoors. He told himself he was going to check on the fundraiser preparations. Morag had been under strain. Eyelid would be organising people into exhaustion. Alec might need help with tables. It was community policing. The heater, tucked beneath his arm, was merely unfortunate evidence. At the school, light glowed from the hall windows. The rain ran down the glass in shining threads. Inside, the fundraiser had begun to take shape. Tables along the walls, donated books in leaning piles, children's drawings clipped to string, a tombola box covered with blue paper, and the fruitcake placed on a scale under Mrs. Wellington's guard. Alec McIver was kneeling near the tea urn, examining an extension lead. "Evening, Spanner." Alec looked up. "Hamish. Trouble?" "It'll do." "That means yes." "It means it'll do if no fool pours tea over it, stands in a puddle, or asks the council to inspect it." Hamish glanced at the old lead. "Safe?" "I'm not happy with it. I told Morag we should use the newer one from the cupboard. This one's been kinked near the plug. Can you fix it?" "I can do many things. Raising the dead and reversing council cuts are off the list." He stood with difficulty, his knees cracking. "I'm phoning Dougie the electrician. If he says bin it, we bin it. If Eyelid says use it, because the urn must go exactly here for the flow of foot traffic, I shall pretend I've gone deaf." As if summoned by criticism, Eyelid appeared from behind a stack of books carrying a roll of raffle tickets and a face of bright strain. "Alec, the urn needs to be ready by 10 tomorrow. The urn needs not to kill anyone by 10 tomorrow." She gave a little laugh, then saw he was not joking. "Can we not simply tape it?" "No." "But just for tomorrow?" "No." "Alec, sometimes one must be practical." "One is being practical." "Electricity is practical. It travels." Hamish liked Alec more every time Eyelid spoke to him. Morag came into the hall with a box of old reading books. She looked tired enough to be transparent. "Leave the lead for now," she said. "We'll use the staff room urn, if we must." Eyelid's mouth tightened. "The staff room urn is smaller. Then people can wait." "People waiting with wet coats and children is not ideal. People dying for tea is less ideal," said Alec. This time Mrs. Wellington laughed aloud, which eased the room for half a second. Hamish slipped toward the side curtain and found his socket. He plugged in the heater to charge, keeping his body between it and the room. Naturally, Kieran Ward entered at that precise moment. "Sir?" Hamish straightened. "I've told you not to call me sir." "I came to assist with community reassurance." "At a fundraiser set-up?" "Yes." "You'll frighten the tombola." Kieran looked at the tables. "Should I check fire exits?" "Aye." Quietly. "And electrical safety?" No. Kieran, disappointed, went to inspect a door that had been painted shut in 1998 and opened once since then during a harvest supper when Archie McLean leaned on it by mistake. A little later, while Alec spoke on his phone in the corridor, Hamish carried a box of books toward the office. He stopped before the staff room door. Voices came from the corridor beyond. Gavin Priest's voice first, clipped and controlled. "Miss Dunnett, I am not accusing you. I am asking you to explain anomalies," Morag answered low. "And I am telling you that rural attendance is not the same as town attendance. Weather, buses, illness. Address verification is not weather. Powsy." Hamish stood still, box in arms. Priest continued. "A child listed at a Lochdubh address appears to be residing outside the catchment. Another has transport inconsistencies. Several late marks are administratively unusual. You don't understand what happens if the school closes. I understand very well. Children are transferred, staff are redeployed where possible, buildings are rationalized. You make it sound clean. It is my job to make it accurate." Morag's voice changed. It became quieter, not weaker. "Give us one more term. I cannot make false recommendations. I didn't ask you to." "No," said Priest. "But someone may have done worse than ask." Hamish heard footsteps. He moved back, as if only just arriving. Gavin Priest came around the corner and saw him. Constable Macbeth. "Mr. Priest, useful evening for community observation? I was thinking of buying a second-hand book." Priest looked at the box in Hamish's arms. "That one?" Hamish glanced down. The top book was Basic Fractions for Primary 4. "I like a challenge." Priest did not smile. He walked past into the hall. Morag emerged a moment later. Her face had been composed too quickly. "Hamish," she said, "I did not hear anything useful." "Then you heard enough." Before he could answer, the lights flickered. Once, twice, the hall gave a collective groan. Someone said, "That'll be the storm." The tea urn clicked off and on. The banner at the window shivered in a draught. Alec came in from the corridor, phone still in his hand. "Dougie says don't use the old lead." "Good," said Morag. "Then we won't," Eyelid began. "But if we put the urn—" "No," said Morag. It was the first firm word Hamish had heard from her that day. The evening broke up soon afterward. People gathered coats and leftover Traybakes. Eyelid stayed behind to sort raffle tickets. Kieran offered to lock up, but Morag said Alec would do it. Alec muttered something about checking the cupboard first. Hamish retrieved his heater, now warm in the hand, and felt both relieved and foolish. He was halfway to the door when Mrs. Wellington appeared in the porch with the fruitcake. "Hamish, would you carry this to the vestry fridge for me? It should not sit in the school overnight." "Is that because of mice?" "No. Children." He took the cake. By the time he returned 20 minutes later, the school hall looked almost empty from outside. One light remained on. The rain had thickened, and the road shone black beneath the lamps. Hamish opened the side door with the key Morag had lent him earlier. He meant only to return it to the office. The smell met him first. Not smoke, not fire. Warm metal, singed dust, and the faint sourness of boiled water left too long. "Morag?" he called. No answer. The hall was dim. The tea urn stood on its table near the socket. An extension lead lay across the floor in a coil too neat for Alec's habits. Beside it, Gavin Priest lay on his side, one hand near the plug, his good coat darkened where water had spilled from an overturned mug. There was no drama in the room, no thunderclap, no scream, only the rain at the windows and the small, ordinary hiss of the urn cooling. Hamish set the school key on the nearest table. "Ah, man," he said softly. He did not touch the body. He moved to the wall and switched off the power at the socket with the back of a wooden chair. Then he stood still, listening to the building. A school after hours has a particular silence. It is never empty. It holds the day's noise in its walls. That night, it held something else. Blair arrived 40 minutes later, in a temper large enough to require its own transport. He came in wet, red-faced, and already accusing the air. Macbeth. What in God's name have your yokels done now? He stood beneath the no-smoking sign with a cigarette unlit in his hand, as if only the presence of a corpse prevented him from improving the atmosphere. Do not call them my yokels, said Hamish. Man from the council dead in a school hall. Dodgy wiring, damp floor, tea urn older than the provost. I could write the report now. That would save you the trouble of looking. Blair glared at him. Do not get smart with me. Hamish looked down at the extension lead. Fresh black tape, wrapped part of it near the plug. Smooth, neat, recent. He glanced at Alec, who had returned, and now stood in the doorway looking as if age had reached him all at once. I told them, Alec said. I told them not to use that lead. Blair heard what he wanted. You did you? Hamish watched the caretaker's face close. Outside, the rain continued. In the hall window, the painted banner shifted in the draught, and the word happy finally peeled loose at one corner. Chapter 4. Canteen Pie, Kitchen Kindness. Strathbane Police Canteen Pie had the texture of regret. It sat on Hamish's plate beneath a pale gravy and beside peas that had lost the will to be green. Blair ate his own portion with the savage focus of a man punishing food for disappointing him. Accidental death, Blair said. Hamish looked at him across the table. You've had the preliminary report 5 minutes. I have eyes. Aye. They're often open at the same time as your mouth. Blair's fork paused. Careful, Macbeth. Kieran Ward sat between them, notebook open, looking like a schoolboy whose parents had begun arguing during a holiday. The electrical examiner said the lead had been tampered with, Kieran ventured. Blair waved a hand. Old lead. Old building. Some idiot taped it. Rural folk tape everything. Pipes, windows, trousers, dogs if they stand still. Fresh black tape, said Hamish. So? Alec McIver uses red tape. Always. Blair stared. Are you solving a murder by stationary preference now? Electrical tape is not stationary. Kieran wrote that down, then stopped when Hamish looked at him. Blair leaned back. The caretaker had access. He had knowledge. He complained about the lead. Then the council man dies beside it. That is not subtle, Macbeth. Neither are you, but we manage. Blair's face darkened. I'll have McIver in. You'll frighten a useful man, and make the village choose sides. The village can take its sides and stuff them. A man is dead. Yes, said Hamish. Which is why we should find out why. Blair lit a cigarette outside the canteen doors afterward, under a sign asking visitors not to smoke near the entrance. He blew smoke into the wet air and said, Your problem is you like them. My problem is damp walls and a fuse box from the age of Robert the Bruce. Do not be funny. I wasn't. By the time Hamish returned to Lochdubh, the rain had stopped, and the village had entered that strange state in which everyone knows something terrible has happened, and nobody yet knows what tone to take. Patel's shop had 3 people inside buying milk they did not need. The Curry sisters stood outside the post office, each with a shopping bag and an opinion. Jessie Curry was thin, sharp-faced, and spoke quickly, as if afraid gossip might spoil if left too long. Nessie Curry was rounder, softer-looking, and delivered her remarks with mournful importance. It'll be the wiring, said Jessie. It'll be the council, said Nessie. How can it be the council when it's the council man dead? Exactly, said Nessie, satisfied by the depth of this. Hamish walked past. Hamish? Jessie called. Is it true Mr. Priest was holding the plug in his bare hand? No. Is it true the caretaker had threatened him? No. Is it true the school will close? Hamish stopped. That was the question beneath all the others. I don't know. The sisters looked disappointed. Not because they wanted the school closed, but because uncertainty is poor material for conversation. At the school, Morag sat in her office with a mug of tea untouched beside her. Children's drawings covered the walls, lopsided houses, blue locks, a dog that might have been Lugs if Lugs had ever possessed such optimism. I keep thinking... I should have stayed, Morag said. And done what? I don't know. That's the cruelest part of shock. It asks you to invent a better past. She looked at him then. Is Alec in trouble? Blair likes him for it. Morag closed her eyes briefly. Of course he does. Was Alec angry with Preece? Alec is angry with damp, sloppiness, unnecessary paperwork, and people who leave muddy footprints after he has mopped. His anger is practical. It does not travel far. Hamish smiled faintly. That is a good description. Morag picked up her mug, then put it down. Gavin Preece was not a kind man, but he was not wrong about everything. Hamish waited. She said, The numbers are bad. Bad enough? Bad enough that everyone has been pretending not to count them properly. A knock came at the door, and Eyelid entered before permission had fully formed. I'm sorry, she said, with the particular brightness of someone who had already decided what help was needed. I brought soup. She held a flask. That is kind, said Morag. I thought you might not have eaten. Hamish studied Eyelid. There were shadows under her eyes, but her hair was neat, her coat belted, her tote bag placed carefully over one arm. She smelled faintly of soap, peppermint, and adhesive plaster, the scent of a woman who carried remedies for other people's small injuries. Terrible business, she said. Terrible. Poor Mr. Preece. Aye, said Hamish. And poor school. The headlines will be dreadful. Morag flinched at that more than she had at the mention of death. Eyelid saw it and softened, or seemed to. I only mean we must be careful. Very careful. No wild talk, no blame. Except Alec's name is already moving round the village, said Hamish. Eyelid's eyes widened. Is it? You had not heard? No. Well, only people wondering. Naturally. Naturally, said Hamish. She set the flask on Morag's desk. If you need help with paperwork, I can come in later. I know where most of the PTA files are, and the old transport forms. I did the filing after Mrs. Drummond retired, remember? Morag said. The police may need things left as they are. Oh, of course. Proper procedure. Eyelid glanced at Kieran, who had just appeared in the doorway with his notebook. Isn't that right? Kieran straightened. Yes. Proper procedure is very important. Hamish could almost hear Blair's voice coming out of him. After Eyelid left, Morag opened the soup flask. Steam rose, smelling of lentils, carrots, and kindness. Do you want some? She asked. I've had canteen pie. You poor soul. She found a spare mug and poured him soup. It was thick and hot and restored his faith in several things at once. Hamish took it to the hall and stood near the tea-urn table. The body was gone. The tape remained in evidence, photographed and bagged, but the faint mark of where the extension lead had lain still showed in the dust. Alec McIver stood by the stage, hands in pockets. I did not touch that lead after I phoned Dougie, he said. I did not ask. You were going to. No. Blair will. Alec looked toward the hall table. The black tape was not mine. I know. I use red because I can see where I've been. Ah, yeah. And because Morag bought a job lot in 2017 after the Nativity donkey tail incident. Hamish waited. The tail kept falling off. Of course. Alec's mouth almost smiled. Then it vanished. Folk think because a man fixes things, he can break them too. They do. And because I don't chat at the gate, I must be hiding something. Hamish looked toward the windows, where daylight lay grey on the glass. Sometimes the village likes a villain who does not answer back. Alec said nothing. That was his habit. But his shoulders lowered slightly, and Hamish knew he had heard. From the office came the faint sound of Morag and Eyelid speaking. Eyelid's voice was soothing. Morag's was tired. On the hall table, someone had left the green rubber stamp from the office beside a stack of fundraiser notices. Hamish picked one up. At the top, in green ink, was the word Approved. The lower left corner of the stamp mark showed the same tiny notch. He put the paper down again. Outside, a child laughed in the playground, though school had ended early. The sound was small, bright, and painful. Chapter 5. The Register That Changed Its Mind. Morag's office smelled of damp paper, pencil shavings, and fear. The fear did not belong only to Morag. It had soaked into the room overnight. It sat in the register, in the drawers, in the files Gavin Priest had requested, in the transport lists tied with elastic bands, in the framed photograph of last year's P7 leavers smiling in jumpers too big for them. Hamish sat on the visitor's chair while Morag unlocked the cabinet. "You know," she said, "there was a time when the worst thing in that cabinet was Mrs. Drummond's biscuit tin. What happened to it? A mouse got in. Biscuit survived? Mouse didn't." She handed him the attendance register. Hamish opened it carefully. The pages were thick with routine. Names, dates, ticks, absences, late marks. Nothing looks more innocent than school paperwork, until one remembers that paperwork can decide whether a place lives or dies. Morag sat opposite him. Her hands were folded again. "I have not altered it," she said. "I believe you." "You say that too quickly." "I know you. That is not evidence." "No. But it is a place to start." She looked away. He moved through the pages slowly. Here were the ordinary disruptions of rural life. Flu, dentist, lambing, ferry delays, road flooding, no explanation, stomach bug, funeral, overslept. The late marks came in green, stamped with the chipped corner. Then he saw the pattern. Not at first. Not as a single obvious fraud. It was subtler than that. A cluster of absences that had become late arrivals. Days where children who, by village memory, had missed morning entirely were now marked as late. A week that had felt chaotic at the gate looked, in the register, merely untidy. "Tell me about this Monday," he said, pointing. Morag leaned in. "Storm. Bus delayed. Robbie Fraser? Late." "Was he?" She hesitated. "Morag. He arrived near lunchtime." Leanne phoned. The road from her temporary place was flooded. "But here he is late. Not absent for the morning." Her face tightened. "I did not make that mark." He turned another page. "And Isla McCrae. The chickenpox day. She was absent. She is marked late." Morag stood so abruptly the chair scraped. "No." She came round the desk and bent over the register. "No," she said again. Softer. Hamish watched not her face but her hands. They hovered above the page as if the paper were hot. "There are too many," he said. "I know. Who has access?" "Me. Mrs. Cameron on reception. Class teachers for their own sheets. Eilidge sometimes helps with PTA filing, but not official records. Alec has keys, but no reason to come in here. Cleaners. Supply staff occasionally." "Where is the stamp kept?" "In the top drawer." "Locked?" Morag gave him a look. "Aye," said Hamish. "That means no." A shadow crossed the frosted glass of the office door. Eilid's face appeared, smiling. "I brought the transport folder," she said, opening the door. "I thought you might need it." Morag shut the register too quickly, Eilid noticed. Of course she noticed. Her eyes flicked from the register to Hamish and back. "Am I interrupting?" "Yes," said Hamish. Morag said, "No." "At the same time." Eilid gave a soft laugh. "There we are. Democratic." She placed the folder on the desk. "I've put little sticky notes where things might be relevant. Not to interfere, only to help." Hamish opened the folder. The sticky notes were colour-coded. "You've been busy." "It is what parents do." "Some parents. Good parents," she said, then seemed to hear herself and smiled. "Committed ones, I mean." Morag's face had gone still. Eilid touched the back of a chair but did not sit. "Has there been any word about Alec?" "Word from whom?" Hamish asked. "People are worried." "People are often happiest when worried in company." She looked faintly offended. "He did say the lead was unsafe." "That makes him a poor murderer." "Warning everyone." "Unless he wanted it known afterward that he had warned us." Hamish looked at her. She blushed, or produced something like a blush. I am only thinking aloud. A dangerous hobby. Eyelids' smile held. You always make things sound less serious than they are, Hamish. No. I make serious things quieter so I can hear them. For the first time, something hard showed in her face. Then it was gone. After she left, Morag opened Gavin Preece's folder. It had been collected from the hall and returned after initial processing. Council notes, copies of forms, his typed checklist, and a few loose sheets he had evidently gathered during the day. Hamish leafed through them. There, halfway down the pile, was a photocopied attendance summary with green stamped marks beside several entries. The stamp mark was the familiar LATE, chipped in the lower left corner. He frowned. "What is it?" said Morag. "This sheet." "When did he get it?" "I don't know. It's dated Wednesday. He arrived Thursday." Aye. The room seemed to shrink. Morag sat down slowly. Someone prepared it before he came. To look official. "But why stamp a loose sheet? We never stamp summaries. Only the register. Someone wanted it to feel like school paperwork. Who would be foolish enough to use the broken stamp? Someone who did not think anyone would care about the corner." Morag put a hand over her mouth. From the corridor came the sound of children rehearsing a song in one of the classrooms. Their voices rose unevenly, one child always half a beat behind. It was such an ordinary sound that for a moment neither adult spoke. Then the office door opened again, and Kieran Ward entered with a flushed face. "Sorry. I was told to report directly." "By whom?" said Hamish. "Detective Chief Inspector Blair. That'll be your first mistake." Kieran swallowed. "He wants confirmation of any address irregularities." Morag closed her eyes. Hamish stood. "Does he?" "Yes. He says we are to investigate possible fraud linked to school roll numbers." "Did he use the word fraud?" "Yes." "Did he use it loudly?" Kieran looked uncomfortable. "He was in Patel's shop at the time." Hamish took his cap from the desk. Morag said, "Hamish, please." He looked back at the register, the notched stamp, the neat green lies lined up in rows. "I'll try," he said. But he already knew trying might not be enough. In Lochdubh, a word like fraud did not travel. It bred. Chapter 6. Hamish's Unofficial Kindness. By 3 o'clock, the rain had eased into drizzle, which in Lochdubh counted as optimism. The school gate filled again. Children came out in bursts. First the little ones, shining with paint and energy, then the older ones, carrying bags, arguments, and secret crisp packets. Parents gathered beneath hoods and umbrellas. The gossip had been waiting all day and came out fresh. "Fraud," Jessie Curry said, tasting the word as if it were an exotic sweet. "Not fraud," said Nessie. "Irregularity. That's fraud in a cardigan." "I heard it was addresses," said Myrie McRae. "Addresses and attendance," said Donalda Campbell. "That is how schools get money." "No one said money," said Mrs. Wellington. "Schools are money," said Donalda, with gloomy satisfaction. Hamish stood near the railings. He had told himself to remain calm. He had also told himself not to throttle Blair with a lanyard, which was perhaps the more realistic ambition. Leanne Fraser arrived late, breathless, her coat damp at the shoulders. Robbie saw her and ran over, dragging his bag along the ground. "Mum, I did sums with shells." "That's grand," she said, kissing his hair. "Where's your hat?" "In my tray." "Of course it is." The circle of talk shifted. Not obviously. Nobody pointed. But people have many ways of making a person stand in the centre of blame. Leanne felt it. Her chin came up. Hamish moved toward her. "Can I have a word?" She looked wary. "Have I done something now?" "No." They stepped aside by the low wall. Luggs followed, then sat on Leanne's foot, which made Robbie laugh. Hamish kept his voice low. "The council is looking at addresses." Her face closed. "I know. Are you still at your cousin's?" "For now." "That's outside catchment." "It's temporary." The ceiling came down in the flat. Not the whole ceiling. Enough. The landlord says it's not his fault because rain is weather. She gave a small, bitter laugh. Robbie's been in this school since nursery. He knows the teachers. He's had enough changes. I understand. Do you? Because everyone else seems to understand rules better than children. Hamish looked at Robbie, who was trying to teach Lugs to shake hands. Lugs had no interest in joining the education system. I'm not here to make trouble for you, Hamish said. Keep your papers together. Notes, bus times, messages from the landlord. And for now, keep your head down. Leanne looked at him sharply. What does that mean? It means, do not give the gossips more to chew. So hide, for a day or two, because if they know I'm outside catchment, they'll say I'm the reason the school closes. Hamish did not answer quickly enough. Leanne's eyes filled, though she did not let the tears fall. I work mornings when I can get them. I clean at the hotel if they call. I walk when the bus doesn't come. I'm not trying to cheat anybody. I know. You knowing does not stop them talking. No, said Hamish. It doesn't. He meant kindness. That was the trouble. So much harm in villages began as someone's private idea of kindness, carried out quietly, without witnesses, without enough thought for what public fear would do to it. Kieran Ward appeared at the gate with his notebook and the anxious importance of a man carrying information. Constable Macbeth, he said. DCI Blair asked whether you had identified any address issues. Hamish's heart sank. Not now, Kieran. I only meant he said you were managing address issues locally. The phrase landed in the gate like a dropped plate. Jessie Curry turned. Donalda Campbell turned. Eyelid Sutherland, who had been speaking to Mrs. Wellington, turned very slowly. Leanne went white. What address issues? Said Donalda. Kieran looked around, realizing too late that procedure had become performance. I did not mean. Blair's car pulled up then, as if summoned by foolishness. He got out, coat flapping, face already red. Macbeth, he bellowed. I hear you've been keeping wee secrets. The children quieted. That was what Hamish noticed most. Not the adults stiffening. The children. Robbie stood beside his mother and looked at Blair with wide eyes. This is not the place, Hamish said. It's exactly the place. School roll fraud, false addresses, tampered records, and a dead councilman. All very cosy up here, eh? Leanne said. I've done nothing. Blair swung toward her. And who are you? Hamish stepped between them. A parent. I? One with an address problem? Leanne flinched, as if struck. Eyelid moved forward, voice smooth. I'm sure DCI Blair only wants facts. We all do, for the sake of the children. Hamish turned his head toward her. He saw the little tightening at the corner of her mouth. Not satisfaction exactly. Control. Morag came down the path from the school door. She looked as if she had aged 10 years between the bell and the gate. Please, she said. Not in front of the children, Blair snorted. The children are the ones being used to fiddle numbers by the look of it. Robbie began to cry silently. Not loudly, which would have allowed adults to comfort him and feel good. Silently, which left the shame visible. Mrs. Wellington pushed through the crowd and put an arm around Leanne. That is enough, she said. Blair ignored her. Macbeth, with me. Hamish did not move. Now. Hamish's voice remained mild. You have made your point, sir. I'll decide when I've made my point. No, said Hamish. You'll decide when you've finished shouting. It's no the same thing. Blair stared at him. The gate stared at both of them. For a moment, Hamish thought he might have to say more. Then Blair jerked his head toward the car. Station. 10 minutes. He left. Kieran stood by the railings, miserable. I'm sorry. Hamish looked at him. The boy was foolish, not cruel. There is a difference, though the consequences sometimes resemble each other. Learn from it, Hamish said. Leanne pulled Robbie close. The other parents began pretending they had urgent things to do elsewhere. Eyelid touched Leanne's arm. Try not to worry. Nobody is blaming you personally. Leanne looked at the hand until Eyelid removed it. That's funny, Leanne said. It feels personal. She walked away with Robbie. The drizzle thickened. Luggs shook himself, spraying Kieran's polished trousers with muddy water. Hamish might have scolded him, but he did not. Chapter 7. The village's favourite villain. Alec McIvor's shed stood behind the school beside the bins, half hidden by a row of wind-bent shrubs that had been planted in a spirit of improvement and then abandoned to survival. Inside, it smelled of paint, damp wood, old tools, and the faint medicinal tang of turpentine. Everything had a place. The place was not always obvious to outsiders, but Alec could put his hand on a hinge screw, a spare doorstop, or the missing handle from the PE cupboard without looking. Blair stood in the doorway, as if entering a den of conspiracy. "Quite the workshop," he said. "Shed," said Alec. "Lot of tools. That is a feature of sheds." Hamish leaned against the wall near a rack of paintbrushes and let them go on. Sometimes silence was useful. Sometimes Blair was useful too, though never on purpose. He pushed people until their habits showed. Blair picked up a roll of red electrical tape from a shelf. "What's this?" "Tape. Don't get clever." "Aye, it would be a shame if there were two of us." Hamish looked down quickly to hide a smile. Blair did not hide anything. "You warned people the lead was unsafe." "I did. Then the lead killed Gavin Preece." "So I hear. You had access." "I have keys. I also have access to the mop bucket. Does that make me responsible for every spilled drink in Sutherland? You didn't like Preece. I didn't know him long enough. But you didn't like what he was doing." Alec's eyes moved toward the school building. Through the small shed window, children could be seen in the playground. "No, because if the school closed, you'd lose your job. I am 58. Not dead. I'd find gutters to fix and locks to mend. Folk break things whatever the council decides." Blair stepped closer. "Where were you when Preece died?" "I told you. On the phone to Dougie Kerr, the electrician." "Aye, convenient." Alec's face hardened. "You can ask him." "We will. I hope you do." "He'll enjoy you," Hamish said. "What time did you call Dougie?" 6:48 first. Then 7:12. He was at his sister's. Bad signal. I went outside by the bins. And after? I put the newer lead on the table by the urn, told Morag not to use the old one. Then I checked the side door, moved chairs, locked the PE cupboard because children are born knowing when a cupboard should not be opened. I left about 7:35. Did you see Eyelid? Aye. Sorting raffle tickets. Gavin Preece? In and out. Looking at papers. He had that way of standing still that makes other folk feel untidy. Blair pulled open a drawer. "Do you mind?" Alec said. "No, I do." Blair ignored him and rummaged. Screws, washers, old keys, string, a packet of plasters, a pencil sharpened with a knife, more red tape. "No black tape," said Hamish. Blair glared. "People can buy tape." "Aye, they can. But Alec does not use it here. A habit is not an alibi. No. The phone call is—" Blair's eyes narrowed. "We haven't confirmed that?" Kieran appeared at the shed door, breathless. "Sir?" Blair turned. "What?" "Dougie Kerr confirms 2 calls. First at 18:48, second at 19:12. Second call lasted 11 minutes. Mr. McIvor was complaining the urn lead was unsafe and asking if he could patch it temporarily. Mr. Kerr says he told him, quote, "If you tape that death trap, I'll come up there and wrap you in it." Alec nodded. "That's Dougie." Blair's mouth tightened. 11 minutes leaves time." "Aye," said Hamish. "For him to commit the murder while speaking to the electrician about not committing the murder." Kieran looked down at his notebook. Blair stepped out of the shed. "He could have returned." "He could have flown to Norway," said Hamish. "But let's hold to the likely." Alec remained inside, one hand on the bench. He did not look relieved. Being almost accused leaves a stain even when the accusation is withdrawn. Hamish lingered after Blair and Kieran moved toward the school. "You all right?" Alec snorted. Grand! That means no. It means what it means. Hamish picked up the red tape. You're fussy. I maintain standards. Eyelid says that too. Alec looked at him sharply. Not the same standards. No. Alec took the tape from him and set it back exactly where it belonged. She likes things looking right. I like things working. That was worth keeping. Later, Hamish walked through the boiler cupboard corridor. It was narrow, draughty, and painted a colour that might once have been cream but had long since surrendered. The PTA cupboard stood near the hall entrance. Inside were boxes of raffle tickets, old bunting, paper plates, balloons, a glue gun, sticky tape, plasters, children's safety scissors, and a green stamp pad. No stamp. Hamish checked the office drawer. The green late stamp was there. Morag came in quietly. What are you looking for? Habits. That sounds vague. It's often better than looking for villains. She leaned against the desk. Alec? No. Thank God. Do not thank him too soon. Blair has stamina when wrong. Morag smiled faintly, but it faded. The village enjoyed it, didn't it? Thinking it might be Alec. Some did. Because he is blunt. Because his house is untidy. Because his nephew was in trouble years ago. Because he does not flatter them. And because blaming Alec means not looking elsewhere. She closed her eyes. Elsewhere being us. Hamish said nothing. On the desk lay the attendance register. The green stamp sat beside it. Ordinary and ugly and patient. Morag touched it with one finger. I used to hate that thing. Children would come in late, frightened because some adult had failed them, and the first thing school did was stamp them. You could have used a pen. Mrs. Drummond said stamps were efficient. Mrs. Drummond sounds formidable. She once made a counsellor cry. Then why is she retired? She said the modern world lacked backbone. Hamish smiled. Morag did not. The altered marks, she said. They make the school look better. Aye. And worse. Aye. She looked toward the playground, where children were racing in circles around a puddle. What do I tell them if it closes? The truth. When you know it. Adults hate telling children the truth, because children hear it. That evening, Hamish returned to his cottage and found the fuse tripped again. The kettle sat silent on the counter. Sunsy had knocked a tea towel to the floor and was sitting on it with proprietary satisfaction. Lugs sprawled in front of the dead stove. You are both useless, Hamish said. Lugs wagged the end of his tail without opening his eyes. The village had found its favourite villain and lost him. That meant it would need another. Hamish feared who would be next. Chapter 8. Sunsy and the Green Pad. The next morning dawned, bright, cold, and insulting. The sky had cleared after days of rain, and sunlight lay across the loch as if nothing dreadful had happened in any building nearby. Hamish's cottage, however, remained damp. The fuse box had adopted the habits of a nervous aunt and fainted whenever asked to do anything. He stood in the kitchen with a screwdriver, a torch, and no real idea what he was doing. Come on, he muttered. The fuse did not come on. Lugs watched from the rug. Sunsy was absent, which usually meant theft, hunting, or judgment. Hamish gave up and carried his kettle toward the stove, then remembered the stove was cold. He considered the school socket again and felt shame creep up like damp. No, he told the room. There are limits. A thump sounded at the back door. Sunsy entered through the cat flap with something in his mouth and the air of a creature delivering bad news at his convenience. He crossed the kitchen, leapt onto the table, and dropped the object onto Hamish's unpaid electricity bill. It was a small green plastic lid. Hamish stared at it. The lid was smeared faintly with green ink. On one edge, stuck to the plastic, was a narrow shred of black electrical tape. Sunsy sat, curled his tail around his paws, and looked deeply pleased with himself. Where did you get that? Sunsy said nothing. That was one of his better qualities. Hamish picked up the lid carefully with a paper towel. It looked like the lid from a stamp pad. Not the office stamp pad, the one in Morag's drawer, had a hinged top and a crack across one corner. This lid was from a smaller portable pad, the sort kept in PTA boxes for notices and children's activities. He held it to the light. Green ink in the grooves. Black tape adhesive. A faint dusting of floor grit. Lugs rose, sniffed once, and sneezed. "Aye," said Hamish. "That is about the size of it." He bagged the lid in a clean freezer bag, because Highland policing often relied on whatever a man had in the drawer beside the tea towels. Then he put on his coat and went out. He followed Sunsea's likely route by instinct rather than science. Over the back wall, through the wet grass, past the path that led toward the school and the bins. Sunsea, offended by being followed after offering evidence, disappeared under a hedge. At the school, preparations for reopening had begun in a cautious way. Parents stood at the gate more quietly now. The children were delighted by the novelty of adults whispering. Mrs. Wellington had brought a basket of scones to the staff room. Mr. Patel had sent extra milk. Archie McLean had offered, inexplicably, a bucket of coal, which the school could not use but accepted with gratitude, because refusing Archie's practical kindness was more trouble than storing it. Hamish found Morag in the hall, looking at the tea-urn table as if it were a place where a ghost might still be sitting. "Do you keep spare stamp pads in the PTA cupboard?" "Yes." "For notices." "Why?" He showed her the bag. She frowned. "That looks like one of the small ones. Where did you find it?" Sunsea did. "Should I ask?" "No." They checked the PTA cupboard. The box containing craft supplies sat beneath bunting and paper plates. Inside were 2 blue stamp pads, 1 red, and an empty space where a green one had been. Morag drew in a breath. "Who uses these?" "Eyelid. Mostly. Sometimes parents making signs." "Does she stamp PTA notices?" "She stamps everything if left alone." Approved, checked, received. Once she stamped the back of Mrs. Wellington's hand by mistake. "Did Mrs. Wellington approve?" she said. It was the most official she had felt in years. Hamish looked through the cupboard. Alongside plasters, scissors, and string lay a roll of black electrical tape. He held it up. Morag frowned. "That's not Alex." "No. We keep it for posters and cables during events." "Who put it here?" "I don't know. Eyelid restocks that cupboard." Hamish remembered Eyelid's tote bag. Plasters. Tape. Peppermint. The scent of preparedness. The woman who fixed everyone else's problems before they had agreed they were problems. He also remembered her bright smile in the office doorway. The way she offered help no one had asked for. The way she said good parents, and then softened it too late. "Hamish," Morag said, "you think—" "I think someone handled green ink and black tape in haste. That is not murder." "No. It is a door opening." Kieran appeared in the hall holding a file. "DCI Blair wants everyone present at the Emergency Parent Council meeting tonight." "Does he now?" "He says a public update will calm speculation." Hamish closed the PTA cupboard. Blair's idea of calming speculation is throwing paraffin on it and calling the flames informative. Kieran looked tired. "I made a mistake yesterday." "Are ye?" "I thought procedure meant saying everything quickly to the senior officer. Procedure is a tool. So is a hammer. You can build with it or hit someone in the face." Kieran looked down. "Leanne's boy cried." "Yes. I didn't sleep much." "Good." Kieran looked startled. "Means you're not ruined," said Hamish. In the afternoon, Hamish went to Patel's for batteries, bread, and gossip. "Mr." Patel stood behind the counter, calm as ever, while 3 customers pretended not to wait for Hamish to say something. "Busy?" Hamish asked. "People buy more biscuits when anxious," said Mr. Patel. "It is not scientific, but it is reliable." Jessie Curry was choosing tea bags with unnecessary concentration. Nessie Curry said, "We were just saying poor Mrs. Sutherland has done so much for that school." "She has," said Hamish. "All was there," said Jessie. "With keys," said Nessie. Jessie elbowed her. "What?" said Nessie. "Helpful people have keys." Hamish turned. "Eyelid has keys?" Mr. Patel said. "For the hall, I think. For setting up." She came in Wednesday to buy tape. What kind? Black electrical tape, and plasters, and peppermint drops. She said the fundraiser box was low. Jessie looked delighted, and ashamed of being delighted. She bought tape, said Nessie. Many people buy tape, Mr. Patel said. The moral weight of tape varies. Hamish smiled. Did she buy a stamp pad? No. But she asked if I had green ink. I did not. When was that? Wednesday afternoon. Before Gavin arrived, Hamish left the shop with bread under his arm and the sense of a pattern drawing itself tight. At the school gate, Leanne stood apart from the others. Robbie was drawing in the gravel with a stick. Hamish went over. I'm sorry, he said. She looked at him. For Blair? For me too. You tried to help? Aye. That does not always excuse the shape help takes. She studied him, then nodded once. Robbie said, Mum says we might have to move schools. Maybe not, said Hamish. Robbie looked up. Do policemen know maybe not things? Mostly we know definitely. Not things. Like what? Definitely not putting jam sandwiches in trouser pockets. Robbie laughed. Leanne did too, unexpectedly, and the sound loosened something in the cold air. Hamish looked toward the school hall. Lights were being switched on for the meeting. Adults would gather under the happy banner, bringing wet coats, fear, pride, and the desperate wish to leave with someone else blamed. The green stamp pad lid sat in his pocket, quiet as a small verdict. Chapter 9. The Parent Council Reckoning. By 7 o'clock, the hall was full. Not crowded, exactly. Lochdubh did not have enough people for crowded unless there was free food or a fight, but it was full of attention. Parents sat stiffly on folding chairs. Teachers lined the side wall. Mrs. Wellington guarded a plate of scones that nobody touched. Alec MacIver stood near the back with his arms folded, refusing a chair and most of society. The banner still hung in the window. We are a happy school. Someone had taped the peeling corner back up. Eyelid Sutherland stood at the front beside the table, neat as ever, pale but composed. Her husband, Alastair, sat in the second row looking bewildered by public disgrace before it had arrived. Their daughter, Catriona, was not present. That, at least, was merciful. Morag sat at a small desk with the attendance register before her. The green late stamp lay beside it. Blair entered last, which Hamish suspected was not accidental. He had put on his best coat and his worst expression. He smelled faintly of smoke. Despite having clearly finished his cigarette outside the school gate under the disapproving eyes of several children. Right, Blair said. We are here because this community has questions to answer. Hamish, standing near the side, murmured, and because you enjoy a captive audience. Blair heard but chose grandeur. A man is dead. Council records may have been falsified. An unsafe electrical lead was used despite warnings. This is not the time for sentiment. No, said Hamish. It is the time for accuracy. Blair swung toward him. Then be accurate. Hamish moved to the front slowly, with a lazy-looking walk that had caused many a foolish man to underestimate him. Lugs had been left outside, theoretically, but had taken up position just inside the side door and was now asleep in a draught. No one had the heart to move him. Or perhaps they feared he would sigh at them. Hamish faced the room. I'll ask for a simple timeline, he said. Before the village destroys another family. Leanne Fraser sat near the back, Robbie's coat folded on her lap, though Robbie himself was at Mrs. Wellington's. People avoided looking at her, which was not the same as shame, but could be a step toward it. Blair snorted. Another family? We are investigating fraud. Hamish's voice remained mild. You are investigating loudly. A few eyes dropped. Someone coughed. Hamish turned to Morag. The old urn lead was judged unsafe by Alec MacIver on Friday evening. He phoned Dougie Kerr at 6:48 and again at 7:12. During the second call, he was outside by the bins, being told not to repair it. Alec said. In colourful terms. Hamish nodded. Aye. Dougie has a gift. A faint ripple of laughter moved through the room and died quickly. Alec then put a newer lead on the table and told people not to use the old one. He left around 7:35. Gavin Preece was later found dead beside the urn and a lead that had been altered. Fresh black tape had been used to hide the damage. Blair said, "McIver could have returned." He could have. But he did not use black tape. He uses red, because he likes to see what he has repaired. That is a habit, not proof alone. But habits matter when they match everything else. Eyelid folded her hands around her clipboard. Hamish picked up the green stamp. This is the school's late stamp. It leaves a notch in the lower left corner because it is chipped. He pressed it gently onto a scrap of paper and held it up. People leaned forward despite themselves. That mark appears in the attendance register. That is normal. But it also appears on a loose summary sheet in Gavin Preece's file dated Wednesday. Morag's face tightened. Mr. Preece arrived Thursday. So the sheet was prepared before he came. It was made to look official. Whoever did it either had the school stamp or access to it, Eyelid said. Many people had access to the office. That drawer is hardly Fort Knox. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Hamish looked at her. True, Blair shifted. He did not like calm unless he had caused fear first. Hamish continued. The register was altered. Some absences became late arrivals. It made attendance look steadier. It made the school look more viable. A murmur rose. Morag closed her eyes. Donalda Campbell said, So there was fraud. Hamish turned to her. There were lies. That is fraud. It may be. But before you enjoy the word, remember whose children you pointed it at. Donalda flushed. Eyelid lifted her chin. Everyone wanted the school saved. Aye, said Hamish. That is the trouble. He took a plastic bag from his pocket and placed it on the table. Inside lay the green stamp pad lid with its smear of black tape. This was found near the school path. Morag, knowing better, did not mention Sonsi. It belongs to the small green stamp pad from the PTA cupboard. That cupboard also held black electrical tape, the same type bought from Patel's on Wednesday afternoon by Mrs. Sutherland. Alastair Sutherland looked up sharply. Eyelid? She did not look at him. Mr. Patel, seated near the door, inclined his head sadly. He had not wanted to be evidence. Shopkeepers rarely do, though they often are. I bought supplies, Eyelid said, for the fundraiser. Green ink too? They did not have any. No, said Hamish. So you used the school ink. And the school stamp. You stamped late marks where absences should have been. You stamped a loose summary sheet before Gavin Preece arrived, hoping the paperwork would look tidy enough for him not to dig. That is absurd. Is it? Yes. Her voice sharpened. The room heard it. Hamish's own voice stayed soft. You liked things tidy, Mrs. Sutherland. Notices straight. Chairs neat. Parents punctual. Children polished. You did a great deal for this school. No one can deny that. Her eyes flickered. But somewhere along the way, the school became proof that you were a good mother, a good citizen, a good woman. If the school failed, it felt as if you failed. So you fixed things. I raised money. You fixed forms. I chased parents. You shamed them. For standards. For pride. She gripped the clipboard. Her knuckles whitened. Blair stepped forward. Are you accusing her or singing to her? Hamish did not look at him. I am giving her the chance to stop before we drag every child's name through the muck. Blair barked a laugh. Children's names? Their parents did that when they fiddled addresses. Leanne stood abruptly. I did not fiddle anything. Blair swung toward her. Sit down. Hamish turned. The change in him was small. His shoulders did not rise. His face did not harden dramatically. But his voice, when he spoke, took on a sibilant edge, quiet and sharp enough to cut the room still. You will not speak to her like that again. Blair's mouth opened. Hamish went on, very softly. Not in this hall. Not under that banner. Not after frightening her child to make yourself feel tall. No one moved. Blair's face flushed deeper. For once, even he seemed to understand that shouting would not help him. Hamish turned back to Eyelid. Gavin Preece found the anomalies. Address verification, attendance changes, catchment compliance. He challenged Morag first, but she did not know the extent of it. He would have exposed the scheme. The school might still have closed, and your name would have stood in the middle of it, Eyelid whispered. I was saving it. There it was. Not confession entire, but truth opening like a seam. Hamish said nothing. She looked around the hall. You all wanted it saved. Every one of you. You wanted numbers, proof, grants, letters, petitions. You wanted someone to make it work. Mrs. Wellington said gently. Not like that, Eyelid. Eyelid's face twisted. Easy for you. Your children are grown. You can be kind because nothing is at stake. That is not kindness, said Morag, voice trembling. That is an insult, wearing its best coat. Eyelid turned on her. You were going to let it die. I was trying not to lie for it. You were weak. Morag flinched, Hamish said. And Gavin Preece? Eyelid stared at the floor. The hall held its breath in the ordinary way of people listening to a life collapse. He said he would recommend immediate merger, she said. He said the records would be referred upward. Upward. That was the word. As if we were dirt on his shoe, and he was sending us to be scraped off. So you altered the lead? She shook her head once. Hamish waited. I only meant to frighten him, she said. Alec made a sound of disgust. Eyelid looked up wildly. I thought, if there was an electrical incident, the review would be delayed. Building safety, temporary closure, appeals, time. We needed time. With him hurt? No. No, not. She stopped. The lie could not cross the room. There were too many witnesses, too many children's drawings on the walls, too much green ink in the grooves of the truth. You changed the lead back, Hamish said. Used the old damaged one, made it worse, wrapped the alteration in black tape. You counted on the storm, the damp, the old building. You counted on Alec being blamed. I did not think. No, said Hamish. You did think. Just not of him. Not of Leanne. Not of Robbie. Not of the children you were so fond of mentioning. Her husband stood, then sat again, as if his legs had received two instructions at once. Blair found his voice. Eyelid Sutherland, I am arresting you. Hamish stepped back. The official machinery could have its moment. It was late, but necessary. As Blair recited the caution, with relish badly disguised as duty, Eyelid looked not at him, but at Morag. I kept it open, she said, almost pleading. Morag's answer was quiet. You made it smaller. They took Eyelid out through the side door. The room did not erupt. No one rushed to speak. The village had been given the villain it wanted, but not the comfort it expected. Alec McIver unfolded his arms and walked to Leanne. I'm sorry, he said gruffly, for saying nothing yesterday. Leanne looked surprised. You didn't say anything against me? No. That's what I'm sorry for. That did more to quiet the room than Blair had managed all week. Hamish picked up the green stamp and returned it to Morag's desk. Outside, Lugs woke, stretched, and blocked the doorway as everyone tried to leave. For once, nobody complained. Chapter 10. The bell still rings. The next morning, the school bell rang on time. It was not a grand sound. It was thin, metallic, and slightly cracked at the edge, like many things that survive in rural places. But it rang, and children came through the gate with bags, scarves, arguments, lunchboxes, and the astonishing ability to step around adult sorrow without absorbing all of it. The air was clear and cold. The hills stood sharp behind the village. Sunlight caught the puddles in the playground and turned them briefly silver. Hamish stood by the railings with Lugs, who had resumed his post as obstruction-in-chief. Sunsey prowled along the wall, tail high, as if considering whether the school might be added to his territory. Keep that wild beast away from the infants, said Mrs. Wellington. Which one? Said Hamish. She looked at Lugs. then Sunsey, then Hamish. I shall leave that to your conscience. Morag came down the path. She looked tired, but no longer hollow. Her cardigan was buttoned wrong at the top, and Hamish did not tell her. Some small dignities are better left alone. The council rang, she said, and they will not close us immediately. That is something. It is not everything. We may have to share a head teacher with Drumlin. The older children may go 2 days a week to the cluster school for certain subjects. There will be oversight, real oversight. Can you live with it? She looked back at the building. Through the windows, children's paper suns hung above a radiator that barely worked. We will have to. Alec McIver came along the path, carrying a new extension lead still in its packaging. For the urn, he said. Morag took it. Thank you, Alec. He nodded, then cleared his throat. Several parents nearby pretended not to listen. I owe you an apology, Morag said. Alec looked alarmed. So do others, she added. Now the parents had no choice but to listen. Donalda Campbell stepped forward first. Perhaps because she preferred leading even when the destination was humility. Alec, she said, I spoke too quickly. I am sorry. He considered her. Accepted, Jessie Curry whispered to Nessie. That was brief, Nessie whispered back. Men like Alec don't garnish. Leanne arrived with Robbie. She slowed at the gate, bracing. The little circle of parents shifted again, but differently this time. Space opened for her. Not pity, not quite welcome. Something more awkward, and therefore more honest. Myrie McRae stepped forward, holding the purple glove from earlier in the week. Robbie left this? Or Isla did? I don't know any more. They all shed clothing like sheep. Robbie looked at it. That's not mine. Mine has dinosaurs. I knew that, said Myrie, clearly not knowing that. Anyway, good morning. Leanne gave her a cautious smile. Morning? Mrs. Wellington came over with a paper bag. Scones. Too many. Accidentally. Leanne looked into the bag. There are 6. An accident of abundance, Robbie said. Can Lugs have one? No, said Hamish. Mrs. Wellington and Leanne together. Lugs looked wounded by this united front. Kieran Ward stood near the gate, cap in hand. He had been waiting with the stiff misery of a young man rehearsing an apology and finding all versions inadequate. Miss Fraser, he said. Leanne looked at him. I'm sorry. I spoke carelessly. I made your private difficulty public, and I hurt your son. Robbie hid behind Leanne's coat, but peered out. Kieran swallowed. It will not happen again. Leanne studied him. See that it doesn't. Yes, Robbie said. Your shoes are muddy. Kieran looked down. His polished shoes had been marked by the school path. Yes, he said. They are. Robbie nodded, satisfied that justice existed. Blair arrived later, when most of the children were inside and the adults had nearly forgiven the morning for existing. He stepped from his car, looked around, and assumed the air of a victorious general addressing villagers after a battle he had mostly made worse. Well, he said loudly, we got there in the end. Hamish looked at him. Some of us arrived by a rougher road. Blair ignored this. Culprit in custody. Fraud uncovered. Murder solved, Morag said. A man is dead, DCI Blair. A woman's life is ruined. The school is under supervision. I am not sure solved is the word I would choose. Blair stared at her, unaccustomed to head teachers with spines. Hamish hid a smile. Blair lit a cigarette by the gate. 3 parents and Mrs. Wellington pointed at the no-smoking sign simultaneously. He swore, put it out, and drove away 5 minutes later, having claimed credit to everyone who did not move fast enough. Inside the school, Morag took the attendance register from her desk. Hamish watched as she opened it to the corrected pages. The false late marks had been crossed through in red, initialed, and explained in a separate note. It was untidy now, more honest. The green late stamp sat beside the register. What will you do with it? Hamish asked. Lock it away. Could throw it out. Morag picked it up. The chipped corner faced them both. No, she said. We may need reminding. She placed it in a small tin box and locked the drawer. The staff room kettle boiled without tripping anything. This was not a miracle, merely Alec's new lead and a socket that had finally been tested by someone qualified. But it felt close enough. Someone had left extra Traybakes on the table. No note. That was how Highland kindness liked to travel. Anonymously. So giver and receiver could both keep their pride. Hamish accepted a cup of tea and stood by the staff room window. Outside, the children ran across the playground. Robbie Fraser chased Isla McRae. Isla wore 2 gloves now, neither matching. Morag came to stand beside him. I keep thinking about what Eyelid said, she murmured. That she kept it open. Hamish sipped his tea. People can do harm with the words they love best. For the children. Ah, yeah. Ah, yeah. They watched a little boy fall, sit stunned for a moment, then accept a hand up from a girl half his size. Morag said, "We will do better." Hamish looked at her. "You'll do human. Better comes and goes." She smiled then, tired and real. At the door, Lugs had somehow entered and sprawled in the one sun patch like a creature who understood endings. Sunsy prowled past the corridor as if inspecting the building for weaknesses, or mice, or moral decline. The bell rang again at midday. Not triumphant, not pure, but steady. And in Lochdubh, steady was sometimes as much grace as anyone had the right to ask. Lochdubh did not only lose a man from the council. It lost a little innocence about what fear can make respectable people do. The school corridors filled with ordinary noise again, but for a while the adults spoke more softly at the gate. That green late stamp had been meant as a dull little record-keeper, nothing more. Yet the tiny notch in its mark became the truth that would not be tidied away. Small lies, like small chips in rubber, leave shapes behind. It is easy to say, "for the children," and mean, "for my pride," or "for my place in the queue," or "for the version of myself I need others to admire." A community protects itself best when it protects the people least able to defend their name. Still, the kettle boiled, the fuse held, and someone left extra Traybakes in the staff room by accident. In the Highlands, kindness often returns quietly, so nobody has to fight their pride to accept it. Have you ever seen a community turn for the children into something sharp? And so we leave Lochdubh with the bell still ringing, the register corrected, and Hamish Macbeth once again noticing the one small mark everyone else was too busy judging to see. Thank you for listening to Highland Mystery. I'm Oliver Finch. Keep warm, keep kind, and beware the tidy little lies that look harmless on paper.